Alrighty, well, thank you everyone for coming for Glendale's first Carbon Conversations Panel 1. And we have Mary DeMocker here, author, and she will be giving us a presentation. Now, I would like to read Mary's bio for you all. So, Mary is a writer, teacher, and editor. Since becoming a mother in 1996, Mary has written about conscious parenting in the age of ecological decline. In 2014, she co-founded and became creative director of 350.org's Eugene chapter. She's led art-centered climate rallies and writings featured in Art Cop 21, PBS NewsHour, National Public Radio, and the New York Times. She's been quoted in the Washington Post, Wired, National Geographic, and more. So thank you, Mary, for being here, and thank you for all of your work, and I can't wait to see your presentation. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Mary.
Thank you so much, Nora. And thank you all for coming. How is the sound here? Yeah, it's all right? Okay. Thank you for coming out on a beautiful night. Well, to me, it's especially beautiful because yesterday in Oregon, we were getting snowed on. It was 28 degrees, so it's really nice to be here. I want to just also thank Tor Allen over there, who is the Solar Schoolhouse and organized this event tonight with Elizabeth. Where's Elizabeth? With Elizabeth, with the city of Glendale, and with the library, and also Dina, who was part of organizing this event tonight. And I just appreciate all the work that you all do every day, all day long, to create more opportunities for connection around things that are going to help us learn together and to, learn a lot of things, but also learn about the climate crisis and how we can be empowered in it. So tonight I'm going to talk about climate revolution, but I'm really going to focus a lot on young people. And what my hope is that we can all work towards a just and vibrant future for everybody. So here's how I'm going to approach this in 3 acts. One is just to give you a little sense of who I am and what organizing I've done with kids. And then I'll highlight 2 projects that people really seem to like and that had a big impact. So those are kind of fun visuals for you to see. The second act will be, what is climate revolution? That's the title of my book, The Parent's Guide to Climate Revolution. So what is that? And the third part will be more nuts and bolts that a lot of parents are wanting these days on how do we talk with and empower young people without scaring them? So, and then how do we amplify their voices? I'm really excited to be co-presenting with this lovely panel over here of young people that Nora is going to tell you more about in the second half. Okay, I'm going to set my timer so I don't take up too much time of our panel. Okay, so I wanted to share that I was back in the 80s and 90s. You can do the math and try to figure out my age, but in the 80s, the early 80s, I was an environmental activist and a social justice activist. And then when I moved out to Oregon to pursue my music career and studies, I kind of went more for the living simply thing and living green as I learned more, and my husband and I learned more about global warming. And really at that time in the 90s, it was much more focus on, living simply and ecologically. And there wasn't much about, oh my gosh, it's happening, we've got to really do system change. So we were full on gardening, biking, lived close to work, solar panels, vegan. I was vegan for a gazillion years. And then, sorry, I went too fast here. Then these beautiful children came along, and if you look around, you might find one of them in this room. And her uncle and her husband. So when I had kids, things just changed. Once you become a parent, for those of you that are parents or might one day become one or have nieces or nephews or you work with children, something changes when you love children. And for me, what was really hard and confusing was that there were more and more storms, and there was more and more global warming, and it was getting worse, but we were all recycling. And at the same time, there was this fossil fuel frenzy in the US. Like, I had thought of oil and all that as coming from the Middle East, and all of a sudden, over in the 2000s, we started fracking, which releases massive amounts of methane, which is actually a more potent greenhouse gas than carbon. So I would literally lie awake at night thinking, what kind of future are my kids going to have? What should I be teaching them? What should we be preparing for? And what the Earth Day messages were every year were, what you can do is change your light bulbs. And you can turn the heat down in your house, and you can shop more responsibly, which usually translated to spend more money. And you should have cloth diapers, and you should hang them. So everything was focused year after year, and still is to a large degree, on what you and I should be doing to shrink our carbon footprints and to live in an eco-friendly way. All of which is really great. Oh, and yeah, don't forget biking. And these really are the predominant Earth Day messages. Maybe you've heard them this week or this month. And corporations love when we focus on individual responsibility, that it's your fault for the climate crisis. And that's what I'm going to address tonight, is we need to shift out of that and to the much larger system-changing actions. So in 2007, the scientists were very clear. Individual actions on their own are not going to save us from this crisis of global warming. And so that was a fundamental shift for me. I really had to move back into, activist mode, and decided that I was going to listen to the scientists who were saying, we have to keep fossil fuels in the ground. We need to rapidly transition to not just clean energy, but zero emission energy. And that would require sweeping government programs, global infrastructure change in energy systems, agriculture, industry, education, all of it. And we weren't doing it fast enough. So we got political. I got political. My family joined me very joyously. And I co-founded 350 Eugene in 2014 and started writing op-eds. Nobody asked me my opinion, and I just said, well, I'm worried about my kids. I'm a mother. I'm going to start pitching these stories about what it's like to love people so much and to be worried about the future that we're creating for them, this bleakness. Hi, come on. And a lot of the focus was on young people, partly because I was parenting, and I also love young people, and I teach young people. My day job is I teach the harp, classical and folk harp, and love teaching that to young people. So it was a natural fit for me to start doing a lot with the arts and with music, with spoken word and theater. And so we started doing art builds. We started making giant puppets for public protests, and those were super effective in engaging young people's imaginations and in engaging the media. We invited young people to speak to the media. We pointed the reporters in their direction. We asked young people to write op-eds. Young people didn't realize that the adults actually cared to hear their voices, and we grew that aspect of 350. Now I want to focus on two of the specific art projects that were a lot of fun for people. So this is my block, and we had been doing, my family and I, a lot of interactive art on the one public space that we controlled, which is our front lawn. And they had a couple of we have some trees on either side of the sidewalk, and a lot of schools nearby, a lot of traffic, a lot of foot traffic, and a lot of bike traffic. And so we've been doing these educational interactive art things for about 4 years, continuously having some kind of issue around, plastic waste or hunger or, the homelessness crisis, some kind of educational, but also we tried to make it beautiful and interactive. And we decided, 350 Eugene and my family and neighborhood and I decided, well, we've got a pipeline in Oregon that we're fighting. We've actually won. It took 15 years, but we didn't, this was back in 2015, and we were fighting an export pipeline for fracked gas, and it had been going on for 8 or 10 years at that point. What they were doing was they were condemning hundreds of landowners' property and saying that they're going to run a pipeline through, and people didn't have any choice. So we decided to dramatize that, and we condemned all of our neighbors' houses and ran a block-long pipeline across all of their lawns, and then we had information along the way, and then we had a selfie station and actions that people could take. They could send a postcard to the governor, they could tweet it. So we had, for 5 or 6 days, we had this big art project that got a lot of attention. So, it looks like the slide. Okay, well, maybe some of my formatting didn't translate, but the key impacts were overnight. The whole county heard about it because we were on the front page. Then there was a week of radio spots multiple times a day, so the whole state of Oregon learned about it. Then Bill McKibben, who's a well-known climate activist, tweeted it out globally, so then all of a sudden there was all this attention on this pipeline that nobody had really heard about. It also unified our neighborhood because we had to get permission from all 50 people who might use the sidewalk we were blocking. The city made us do that, and so we got to know every student who was in anybody's backyard or living in their attic apartment. And it was the first time we had known all 50 people on our block in the 20 years that we had lived there at that point. So the other key learning for me was that the young people, all of them on the block, from toddler to college, they jumped in. Every single person was part of it in some way. A lot of them didn't know anything about the pipeline or about the climate, and they were educated, and then they became media people. Some of them were interviewed because then we were on TV a couple of times. So I think for me that was a pivotal moment to see how happy it made people to be part of this wacky, kind of desperate thing that went on for 6 days on the block. And then eventually this helped with the resistance to the pipeline because all of that publicity sparked a statewide pipeline resistance movement. And then people from Portland, a big population center north of us, connected with us in Eugene, and we were between Portland population center and the site of the pipeline, the export pipeline, which is a small town that needed a lot of help. So for me, that was a big moment of learning in terms of, okay, this works. Fun, artwork, young people, interaction with the public. Okay, so that was the first project, and then later that year, we decided to go bigger, and we went downtown on the eve of the Paris climate talks, and we invited some kids to write speeches, make banners. There was an art build for those sunflowers and a giant puppet. So the kids gave speeches, they did chants, and then they led this march of hundreds of people with the Sun Queen, and we went into a park, and this is a drone shot of, so before the Paris climate talks, there was this global plan of climate activists that, okay, our messaging is off dirty energy, on clean energy. We want a binding global climate agreement. So that was the global, try to figure out how to say that in your community. And so I racked my brain and talked to people and, collaborated with my family. We decided we were gonna do 500 people turning from an oil drip into clean energy. And so on my website, there's a video of this. And actually, the video of it was actually shown to world leaders in Paris. Like, we registered with this Avaz organization, and because we were one of the first protests, we purposely did it early in the weekend before they all started gathering on Monday morning. We got ours out, we got ours filmed and out that night, edited in a few hours, out that night, and it was 3 of our shots are shown in this. And I was able to announce that to people that were part of this because I knew we were registered and I knew we were on the front end. So it was a joyous day. It was warm, which is unbelievable, Thanksgiving weekend in Oregon. But what I really noticed again was the happiness of the young people. And one of the leaders, who was 16 years old, who gave a speech, was interviewed on TV, said to his mom that night, "Mom, this was the best day of my life." And again, that just brought home to me that something as overwhelming as the climate crisis really requires engagement that's positive and meaningful. And if you can make it fun, it helps connect us all, but also make us happier. So that was my real takeaway, was eco-anxiety is mitigated by positive action with other people. So around this time, this is 2015, the parents of some of these happier kids started saying, well, give me a list of 5 or 10 things I can do. And so I started a list, and then it turned into 100, and that's the book that I wrote, was The Parent's Guide to Climate Revolution, 100 Ways to Build a Fossil-Free Future, Raise Empowered Kids, and Still Get a Good Night's Sleep. And what that is basically 2-page chapters. So when I say 100 ideas, it's 100 short ideas. I say it's a bathroom book for busy parents. At the end of each chapter are 3 to 15 ideas for, if you have $0, here's what you can do. If you have $10, if you have $100, if you have 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day. It's those kind of ideas. It's just a big menu of ideas. It's not a to-do list. So that's the book. And now I want to move into, review. Someone told me recently, you have so many ideas, it's kind of overwhelming, Mary. You need to stop and tell people what you just told them. So you're my first audience. You're the test audience of, so we learned why the climate crisis can't be fixed by individuals. There's too much that has to be reduced. We have to slash emissions in half. Second, that's going to require it's going to require everybody, government, industry, farmers, young people. It's going to require whole society change, but that's really going to need to be led and funded by government policies. And the young people tend to feel better and happier and more empowered when they're engaged in meaningful solutions, not just recycling, not just some of the small stuff. And for some people, that may be the best thing. So I'm not at all negating that. I'm saying that a lot of young people understand that we need big, swift, bold action, and they're happier when they're engaged in that. So I'm going to tell you more about how to do some of that. This presentation is really focused on that because there's so many other people that are already covering the ground of what you can do at home, what you can do locally, what you can do at schools. So my specialty is to show what maybe we can do to support young people who are really eager for system change. Okay, so Act 2, what is climate revolution? Actually, it was my publisher's idea, climate revolution, so I'm just making this up. So here's what I think. We're like, what it should be, climate rebellion, climate revolt? And he's like, no, we need something bolder, climate revolution. Okay, so what is climate revolution? I see it as the old system isn't working, which is built around fossil fuels, and we need to quick change to a new system, so that's revolution, right? That's when you throw out the old and you try on something new. And what we need to do is what science demands, which is to slash emissions in half in like 6.5 years. We're going the opposite direction as a society, so that's why you're all here, probably why a lot of you are here. Like, what can we do? So that's what I call climate revolution, doing what the scientists say. There's 2 parts for me. That's number 1. The second part, I'll give you a little preview, is to do it fairly. So first we're going to look at how do we slash emissions? Okay, slashing emissions means that we have to end the fossil fuel era. A lot of us have been trying for 2 decades. A lot of this is seeping into the mainstream. It gets bandied about by politicians at high levels and sometimes completely ignored and denied, depending on who's in the White House and who controls the Congress, as you know. But because fossil fuels are the leading cause of emissions, we have to end fossil fuels, and we have to do it now. So one fact when people don't quite or not sure that that's really true is that 90 corporations are responsible for the overwhelming majority of greenhouse gas emissions. So we need to end fossil fuels and leap to clean, zero emission technologies, most of which already exist. So that means solar and wind everywhere. Wind is the cheapest form of energy that you can get right now. And it's the fastest, and it's clean, and it's affordable. One of the things that is kind of not as well known is restoring wetlands and riparian areas. People generally know about the importance of protecting trees, which are carbon, they lock in a lot of carbon, but they don't always know that rangelands matter and agriculture matters, how we farm matters. Coastal areas are apparently major places to sequester carbon. So coastal forests, you've got some, we've got some. So another thing, yeah, like I mentioned, regenerative agriculture. These are some farmers back east. It enriches the soil, it captures carbon, and then a lot of this regenerative agriculture is also connected to the zero food waste, the zero waste movement, which is important as well. We can green our cities. This is, you would probably guess, Amsterdam, the most, or maybe it's Copenhagen, more bikes than cars. They have bicycle infrastructure. Nobody's wearing a helmet because you don't have to worry so much about colliding with a car. One of the top ways to slash emissions is to educate girls and women everywhere, all over the planet, because this is a lever on population growth, and it's good for community health. When you have women and girls educated, they tend to give back in critical ways to their community and to family and community health. You can read about any of these solutions in Drawdown. Tor has it over there. It's fabulous, and there are more solutions than I have time to share tonight. So this is the second part of climate revolution, is doing all of these things fairly. On a global level, a lot of people know that the global north is responsible for most emissions, and the United States has more legacy emissions in the atmosphere than any other country. So this whole, we should be blaming China or India, it's the US. And it's the US that's the global leader in terms of military and finance and ambition. So when Trump pulled out of the Paris Climate Accords, that was very damaging to global ambition. So we're in the belly of the beast in many ways, and there's a lot more power in terms of our voices than there are in other countries in general. Obviously, it matters how we use that power. One of the things that the global south, and particularly island nations, are asking for is financial help to transition their infrastructures, to ruggedize them, to prepare for the coming impacts, and to help them bounce back after the intense storms that are more intense in the global south. Okay, so good news and bad news. The good news is all of these solutions are actually better for human health. If you don't have fossil fuels, you cut down by millions on a global level the number of people who die every year from lung diseases. You cut down on childhood asthma, and you generally cut down on pollution and toxicity in your cities. Another thing about choosing a more democratized and decentralized form of energy is that our local economies are more resilient. We bounce back from storms, and you don't have this brittle system where everybody loses, 500,000 people lose power, when you have micro wind and micro solar and passive and all kinds of more decentralized forms of energy. Okay, so here's the bad news. Fossil fuel companies don't want to end selling coal, oil, and gas. That's obvious. And they control a lot of politicians who are, because they're so wealthy, the top 6 campaign contribution recipients. No, the top 6 givers of money in the last several elections were all oil companies. So it infiltrates our it infiltrates our political system. Okay, and if you don't know about Exxon, there's a book out called Exxon New, and essentially Exxon has known since the 60s that their product was heating the planet. Their own scientists were doing as good or better work than NASA was doing in terms of predicting when things would really become rough. And they predicted it almost to the year in terms of the temperature rise. They then did, instead of leading the public to, sharing the public, supporting science, trying to mitigate the crisis, they actually started attacking scientists and misleading the public, which they've been doing now for about 2 decades, and robbed us of critical years to switch off of fossil fuels. So more and more governments are suing the fossil fuel companies, so that'll be interesting to see how that plays out in court. So a lot of times people feel like, well, this is overwhelming, it's government, has to do it. But I want to say part of the bad news is that there's actually not anything sort of teed up to get us to slashing our emissions in half by 2030. At the executive level, even a pro-climate solution president is hobbled by a climate-denying Congress. And the judiciary has now, with the 6-3 majority of conservatives, they are much more pro-industry than past justices. So we're seeing how that's playing out in some of the fossil fuel cases that are now getting to court. So that's not to depress you, but it's also that if we are trying to actually do what needs to be done and try to empower young people and create a future, this is it right now, today, the next few years. And we have to be honest about what we're facing. We are facing a government that is captive to fossil fuel interests through their subsidy programs, through the ways that the politics are taken over by campaign contributions. It's pretty straightforward. So while there are people that are trying, I don't want to negate that. I think we really have to be honest about the fact that we are not on track with science-based solutions. Not only that, but our global meetings are actually shaped in ways that would shock you if you're not up on this by fossil fuel corporations. There were more fossil fuel lobbyists at the last global meeting than there were delegates. There were more than 600 fossil fuel paid lobbyists. Next year's is going to be run by the CEO of the United Arab Emirates oil company. So that sort of tells you the kind of ambition that these global agreements have. And people have been screaming about this for years, but a lot of the public doesn't actually know how corrupt it is in that sense. Billionaires are not going to save us with their swashbuckling Mars fantasies, nor with their geoengineering. Sorry, Gates. Sorry, Elon Musk. They're not leading us. They're actually have media that's really has rampant climate misinformation, especially since Musk took over Twitter 6 or 8 months ago. So that's a little rough. Okay, so this may explain why recent research has revealed that young people are pretty pissed off. They feel betrayed by our generation. They feel frightened. Well, you can see some of these statistics up here. More than half say that they feel it affects their daily lives and functioning. Now that's already, let's step out and put the context of school shootings, the rising costs of living, social media and its craziness, the debt. There's a lot that young people are really dealing with, and for the most part, you guys are like, yeah, tell me about it. I think we need to just sort of stop and say, instead of blaming social media, it's like the news every day is filling young people's feeds, whether it's, the paper that their parents are reading and they see headlines, or it's on their phones, or it's on their TV, of doom and gloom and despair and melting ice caps and extinctions and pollinators dying and, we only have a few years. So I can't imagine getting that message as a 16-year-old. When I think back to where I was, I just wanted someone to have a crush on me, I wanted to have a best friend. I was thinking about where I was going to go to college and what my Latin exam, how I had just failed it or something. we shouldn't be putting these burdens on young people who are still learning how to be in their bodies and in our societies, and their brains are still myelinating until they're in their 20s. Why are we saying we're going to raise up climate activists, or we're going to, bring on the next generation when we don't have the time for kids to even grow up at this point? So that's my kind of strong message is it's now, it's all of us, all generations working together. So parents, how many parents are in this room? Okay, a fair amount. Okay, so we are uniquely, the reason I wrote the book is none of my friends with their kids were coming to the rallies that I was organizing. Oh, well, they would come to the rallies, but they wouldn't then help plan them very much. And so I started saying, what is it going to take to get you liberals to come, join the movement? And they're like, make it easy. And we're overwhelmed. And so I started, trying to remind parents that we have this incredible power. As I mentioned before, we're in the belly of the beast, so we have, outsized power from other parents and other nations that don't have the political power on a global level. But we have a unique power to amplify young people's voices and help them because we love them. Love is a pretty powerful force. We also have moral authority because we don't have an agenda. We're not selling anything. We have a moral authority that we want to protect our children. We're hardwired to protect them. I would take a bullet, as any of you would, for your kids. That's how it works, unless you're not very healthy in your mental state. But every healthy adult will take a bullet for their child. The other reason that parents are important is that we actually, I remember realizing at one point, I have more money than ever. I have more friends. I have more relatives. Like, I'm at this point in my life, sort of mid-stride, where I have my networks from college. I have my networks from my neighborhood. I have, spiritual networks. I have work networks. Like, I know more people than I've ever known in my life. These are networks of power. These are networks of resources and opportunities for young people. And we, I know the mayor now. I didn't know a mayor, 10 years ago. So I think sometimes we forget when we're in our, kind of busy, that we actually have a lot to offer young people in terms of connections and financial support and expertise. So there's the pitch for parents. Okay, so now you've heard about solutions. I kind of ran through some of the natural, nature-based solutions that are proven, that are existing, that need to be scaled up. So I want to just, breathe. There are solutions. That's what the scientists are telling us. And now I want to move to the third part, which is how do we talk with and empower young people of different ages? So first, reminder, we have to get clear on why there's hope to make the future better. Scientists say it's difficult but doable, and it requires radical changes. I love when scientists use words like radical and revolutionary, but those are the kind of words they're using now. Okay, so I'm gonna now just go through a few kind of fast, ideas. Again, a lot of these are from the book. You can buy the book so you can take it home. But right now I'm just gonna kind of skip through several ideas for you to try on. Do not take this as a to-do list. We spent a lot of time, we didn't burden our kids with any talk about global warming. We just helped them with what they were already doing, which is loving everything. We don't have to teach them to love nature, we just have to let them maintain their connection to nature. We tried to offer, and a lot of schools and people like Tor and Dina, offer hands-on connections to the solutions that already exist, making solar or sun tea. We try to tell a lot of stories or connect, get library books about eco-heroes, about kids that are doing great things, about people in history who have fought for justice. And we tried to model, bringing soup to the neighbor that was sick and caring for the elderly. Just an ethic of care, I think, is really important with young people. And we take care of the earth, we take care of each other. If you've got space for it, try composting, try gardening. Kids love that, and they love to know where food comes from. And I think it's also important to share the innovative, and I mean, this really makes people happy to see a solar farm in the shape of a panda. Kids love to see those kind of solutions. Adults love to see them. So share those. Some of the research has shown that the key piece is to listen. So when they come home and they're like, what? The butterflies are going extinct? Pandas are, dying out? What they need is not the fix-it hat. They need us to put our phones down and listen to them and ask their ideas. And if they're young, to kind of be a little vague about the news that's going on. Some kids really just need to feel like they have a sense of control, and it helps to have a preparedness plan. And especially here, or in Northern California, there are some kids that when the wind changes, they have panic attacks now. People who lived through the fires. So having a plan for, what are you worried about? I'm worried about where's my dog gonna go if there's a flood? Where are the horses gonna go? My neighbor's horses if there's a fire. How am I gonna, make sure grandma's okay? So just making a plan helps some kids. And then this I think is an under advocated one, is to actually go to protests, take them. Model what it's like to ask your leaders to be good stewards like you're teaching your kids to be. And then like we did, use the spaces that you have. Now, we also promised to give you some lifestyle, at-home changes. And again, just quick ideas. Cutting food waste is an easy one that's impactful. Make it small, make it fun, celebrate your victories. But okay, that was pretty much it for me on the at-home stuff, because like I say, there's a lot out there. Pivoting to bigger changes in your city here, in your state, on the global level. It's important to talk to young people, but it's just as important to talk to other adults, decision makers, policy makers. So go ahead and challenge your pediatrician. Hey, are you speaking out as a healthcare provider on the risk that burning fossil fuels is to our children's health? How are you speaking out against gas stoves in people's homes? How are you educating families about what fossil fuels do to child health? Are you using your role to advocate at a national level? Are you part of a pediatric group? Are you in an article? Are you willing to be interviewed on the radio or be on this panel with climate activists? There's a lot more merging of healthcare people and doctors and climate activists. Ask her, this is our governor, what are you doing to protect my child's safety and future? Okay, here's one small thing you can do at home. Break up with your bank. If it's Citi, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, or Chase. I know that some of you are feeling that little credit card in your wallet right now, like crying out and whimpering. So consider cutting it up and going to a local credit union that does not invest in climate chaos. All four of those banks, they're the top four on the planet. They have put trillions of dollars. They have funded new pipelines, expanded Arctic drilling. These are the criminals. Okay, now switching to, that was the younger kids and things you can do at home. Now for older kids, I just want to again remind all of us, imagine the fright if you were a teenager of some of the imagery now. And they're wondering why, my son said when he was 11, don't adults care what happens to us? And I just thought that was the most heartbreaking statement. So the next thing we can do for young people, especially as they start reading and watching things, is to re-story the future and really limit dystopic media, which is hard, I know. But I think we need to confront the idea that apocalypse is inevitable and ask whether we're feeling that ourselves. So cynicism is contagious, doomism is contagious, and it's exactly where corporations and people who profit from polluting our planet, that's where they want us, completely paralyzed. So find your way to instead plot what you're going to do to demand climate solutions. So again, connecting to solutions, that book is a treasure trove, or you don't have to buy the book, you can go online to draw down There's a beautiful, it's literally one of the most beautiful photographic websites I've ever seen, because it's global and they put effort into making it, you know, a little bit of eye candy. This isn't the best example of that, but this is just the front page. It's a free website. They have a lot of materials. Draw down the book or the website. Okay, so I recently did an article that ran in Popular Science. Look it up if you want to. Just Google my name and Popular Scientist. And it was kind of more cutting edge research about what young people are saying they want. And I've kind of touched on this earlier, but they want honesty. They want climate literacy in school. And then they want time to talk about it. And they want civic empowerment. They want change. They want to learn about it, and then because they tend to be pretty idealistic, the younger they are, they want to actually do the right thing. So that's a key part, is the civic empowerment. Another thing that young people love is to learn about other youth activists, to learn about Sunrise Movement, and I think there are some people here who have a little to say about that, and about Greta and the school strike movement that kind of, you know, a lot of it ended, or at least took a hiatus with the pandemic, but that is rising up again. And this is very exciting. There are a bunch of kids who are suing the states of Hawaii and Montana for their right to a habitable climate system. They're suing their governments for contributing to climate chaos. And these campaigns have been going on for more than a decade, but there's one that's finally going to trial in June in Montana. So kids are really excited when they learn about kids suing the government. And there's a lot of great short films about this. Look under Our Children's Trust. I have a slide at the end for you to photograph that has resources on it. There's also a movie about this campaign on Netflix, so it's free if you're a Netflix subscriber. And it's recent, and it's really uplifting, and it's very dramatic. There's also, yeah, I'm sorry, my slides differently formatted through this system. This is called Youth to Power. Jamie Margol wrote it, and it's a wonderful guide for young people on their voices and how to use it. And that's at the end, too, on the last slide. Kids really benefit from just knowing that you're willing to help them. You're willing to make them pizza if they want to have a climate club start at your house. We started one in our backyard with my son and some of his friends. This is their school at a recent walkout. And one of the things that young activists tell me is we're so sick of adults thanking us and telling us we're awesome. What we want is to be joined. We want people to actually do it with us, because it's terrifying to have everybody waving at us and telling us how great we are, and then like, good luck with that climate thing. So join young people. Don't put them on a pedestal. You can thank them if you want to, but you know, buy them t-shirts and megaphones and show up at their next thing and help them organize it. One thing that I want to, this is, we're wrapping up a little here, and I wanted to say that in 2012, there were dozens of new fossil fuel projects or expansions proposed in my neighborhood in the Pacific Northwest. And we were terrified. And now, 11 years later, how many of those projects do you think have been built out of the maybe 38 that were proposed, and some of them look like done deals in 2012? Come on, give me some guesses. How many have been built? Yes, okay, yes, you're brilliant, 0. And the reason is that we've had a ferocious uprising, and all through Oregon, Washington, British Columbia. It's been really beautiful to be part of, I have to say, in Northern California. And this is just proof that when we fight, we win. Or at least we make some changes. I may not win the whole big thing. I mean, we've got a big, daunting problem to solve. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm certainly going to try. And it's really nice to have your good, fine company on this. And here's another factoid. I'm sorry, again, about not being able to read it. Erica Chenoweth wrote a book recently about what it takes for a nonviolent revolution to succeed. Turns out it takes 3.5% of the population actively engaged in the problem. Nonviolent, then it makes the changes last. So that's not very many people, 3.5% actively engaged. So I want to end on the proposal. The theme here is that young people's energy, their innovation, their brilliance, everybody loves young people. Everything that they bring, their brilliance and their moral authority combined with the things I mentioned earlier, our networks, our financial power, our access to power, our expertise, our love for them, we'll do anything for you. Those things together, that's pretty unstoppable. And I don't think that it's actually been built out very well yet. I think we're still working on that. I work part-time for a global organization called Our Kids Climate, and we work all over the world, networking parents who are doing intergenerational climate work. So that's another organization on the last on the last slide. But we are doing our best to build the intergenerational climate movement. Oh, here's some takeaways. Okay. Let me just see how many slides. Okay, so that's the last. This is the last one I'll end on. So just in terms of what the takeaways are, reminders, kids are afraid of a bleak future. They're right to be afraid because they're being told that that's where we're going. They need our compassion. They need our honesty, facing this with them. They need our honesty that changes are here and there are more coming. And that's kind of a new thing that I'm saying that I wasn't saying 5 years ago as much, that I was kind of on we can win. We can get to 350 parts per million. And we're not going to get there till long after I'm dead if we get there. It's possible to bring it back down, but it'll take time. So there's warming locked in for the rest of every person's life in this room. The question is, how much are we going to save? How many lives are we going to save? We can make it a thriving future, even if it's a changed future. And that depends on what we do now. Number 4, kids need climate literacy. They need your emotional support. They need you to listen, and they need civic empowerment because they are rising up. I mean, Sunrise, Fridays for Future, the student strike, it's coming. It's coming for all of us. It's really going to be, it's bigger and bigger, and it's life-affirming, and they're wonderfully mature, and their analysis is spot on. Last thing, I already mentioned it, kids and adults together, unstoppable. Here is okay, this one formatted well. If you're interested in taking a picture of this, there are several resources that I've mentioned, and you can ask me afterwards if you want. Obviously, this is a very, there's so much out there, so many good podcasts, so many good groups, more every day, because more and more people are joining in this, the sweeping changes that we need to make. Okay, I would like to turn it over. Nora, thank you so much for your attention, and on to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. Now I would like to invite each panelist to go on stage. And as they do, I'm just going to go ahead and read their bios for you. So we have Mike. Mike is a political science student at Glendale Community College. He is also a student ex officio commissioner of, I'm just going to stop for the noise for a second. Okay, it's still going. Almost there. Yippee! And he is also an executive board member of the Democratic Party for the San Francisco Valley. He's an avid supporter of sustainable infrastructure, transit, and urban planning, with career aspirations to work in politics to help communities. And we also have Yuzuna in the middle right there. And Yuzuna is a student passionate about sustainability, environmental science, and environmental law. She is a student ex officio commissioner of Glendale Sustainability Commission, a member of the California Commission on the Status of Women and Girls, a NOAA Oceans Guardian Youth Ambassador, and a future Blue Youth Council member. Her goal is to spread climate change awareness and develop creative climate change solutions. We also have Julia right over there. And Julia is a Crescenta Valley High School senior passionate about enacting social progress through sustainable development. She founded the Pear Tree Foundation, establishing a platform for students to spearhead community environmental initiatives. She was part of One Up Action LA and Extinction Rebellion Youth LA and organized demonstrations and meetings with LADWP leadership regarding the water crisis. In the fall, she will be majoring in sustainable environmental design. And I also have a bio for myself, but honestly, all you need to know about me is that I like Taylor Swift and the Earth, both probably too much. And I will go ahead and now join the stage. So this is a discussion panel. So anytime, if you'd like to make any comments or ask questions yourself, please raise your hand and I will call on you. So basically, kindergarten rules. I want to start by asking questions that are a little bit personal so we all get to know each other. So could you all please tell me about when you started to consider yourself climate activists?
So I guess I'll start off first. Thank you, Nora.
Go ahead.
I don't think it was like a specific point in time. I think it was more gradual and progressive. So I want to say somewhere in sophomore year of high school, after taking a biology class with Mrs. Evans By, I started learning more about climate change and how it can affect everyone on the planet. And I kind of just started like watching YouTube videos, reading books, listening to professors speak on college campuses, and I was like, oh, this is intriguing. And now it's becoming kind of important. And so that's how I became involved as a climate activist and started believing in the movement.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it's the same for me. I think it was really gradual. I was always like pretty conscious about my actions, but I took an AP environmental science class in my junior year, and that really helped me understand like the really great impacts of the things that I'm doing and also how the world is changing. And also, she introduced my teacher, the same teacher actually, Miss Evans By, introduced me to some really cool climate solutions, and that really kind of inspired me to look more into that. And ever since, I think I've been really inspired to really work toward a greener future. So, yeah.
Like that. Perfect. That really inspires students, but before I got to meet that teacher during the pandemic and when everything was online, I was just looking for ways to get involved, and I feel like peers or people that were older than me that I knew at school were really getting politically involved at the time, and specifically in climate activism. So I remember just messaging someone that I knew from my cross-country team and asking, oh, what's this like initiative that you're part of? I'm really interested, but I don't really know anything about climate action myself. Do I have to know about these things in order to get involved? And everyone in the movement is super welcoming and just, as Mary was talking about, just wants more people involved, and they're really encouraging. And, everything that you talked about really brought me back to when I first felt like I was a climate activist, and learning about all of this and having a mentor and just learning about the specific issues that I wanted to get involved in. And then I did later that year take AP Environmental Science, and I became really educated on all the specifics. So that was when I felt like I was a climate activist.
Just to chime in here, by the way, Mike, Yuzuna, and I all have had the same environmental teacher. So there's a pattern here. And a follow-up question, and one that I ask literally everyone who interacts with our office: what does sustainability mean to you? Because we're the Office of Sustainability.
I'll go first. So sustainability to me just means being aware of how you consume your resources and also looking towards the future. I feel like a lot of people can go about their day not being very conscious of the impact that we have on our environments. And sustainability to me just means being more aware of that and really appreciating the resources that we have when we use them.
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything you just said, but also just like the individual actions that show that you're thinking about how you're using up the like natural resources, but also like government entities and other organizations who have a lot of power. Just also thinking about how their actions are influencing the environment, and taking steps to prevent like the tragedy of the commons and using up all of these resources. So yeah, definitely just looking toward the future and making smart choices.
Yeah, absolutely. And to echo what both of you said, I think it's vital that especially people who are younger are engaged with civic engagement, talking to your local politicians, your state senators and assemblymen, because at the end of the day, this is how they figure out what the people want, and we are current and future voters, and that, they care about that. And so if you're going to take anything away from what I'm saying, is that civic engagement is pivotal, because that is pretty much the only way we can really solve climate change, is by government policy and having action to better manage our climate crisis.
I actually am having trouble hearing, so I'm not sure what the question was. Did you say what is sustainability?
Yeah, what does sustainability mean to you? What does it mean to you?
Okay. I actually question the concept of sustainability. A lot of climate activists are really questioning that word itself, because a lot of there's a question about what's actually sustainable in terms of like sustainable tourism or sustainable development, when really what's required by the science at this point is for us to completely change how we're doing everything. So for me, that's not exactly my specialty, because I'm kind of coming from the activist a little more like, we've got to change everything fast. So it's not really my realm, I guess, as much. And I would just also throw out, just for us to consider, Robin Wall Kimmerer has a book called Braiding Sweetgrass. Has anybody read that book? Yeah, so a few. Okay, it's a beautiful book of stories. She's an indigenous a member of the Potawatomi tribe, and she's also a botanist, so she comes at sustainability questions from both angles. And it's really weaving in the idea of what are we calling natural resources, and it's more about fundamentally shifting our relationship with the earth that gives us so many gifts. And the idea that if we do that in relationship with a grandmother or a child, we have reciprocity. So it's just something to think about, is the idea of reciprocity and being in relationship with the earth instead of thinking of it as resources. So I'll just throw that out as food for thought. Robin Wall Kimmerer's Braiding Sweetgrass.
Well, thank you. We are going to get even more personal here. What is an imperfect environmentalist action that you did recently, or something that can be considered like imperfect, but we're all human? So.
I take really long showers, which is ironic because I got involved in the climate movement surrounding LA's water crisis, but I do waste a lot of water, so I'm sorry.
For me, I advocate for public transit a lot, biking, walking, but there are times where I'm like, that bus is in like 1 hour, let me like order Uber. So that kind of is my imperfect environmentalist initiative. I
have a very similar confession. I got here using a Lyft. So yeah, definitely.
Well, I'm self-conscious because I'm staying at this Airbnb, and I wasn't sure if I could drink the water when we came in last night, so I grabbed this bottle. So I'm just aware that I'm self-conscious about this. And at the same time, I actually kind of question the whole framework of imperfect environmentalists, because I think we're all captive within a fossil fuel industry, and we're captive within systems that use plastic. You can't actually blame us as individuals for the system that forces us to buy plastics all the time. So I think what we need to do is lift our gaze off of each other and saying, what did you do? Or I'm feeling bad about this. And start looking at, why does Nestle put 4 million tons of plastic waste into our ecosphere every year? 4 million, I could be wrong about that, it's some number of millions, 4 to 8 million. We need to be asking why there's plastic waste, not why did you take plastic on your, on your road trip. I think we need to really examine the idea that Kathleen Dean Moore has spoken about, the philosopher, when she said, I'm not, the polluters, they externalize their pollution. I'm not going to let them externalize their shame. So I think we need to question what we take on as people who are engaged in these activities of trying to change the system, and yet forced to live with the lifestyle, the modern lifestyle. Otherwise, we're going to spend all of our time walking everywhere and living in a cardboard box. So that's my, sorry, I keep challenging your questions, Nora.
No, that's really good. That's what we want. This is another question, but it's not that personal. And so, would you rather question? I like to ask this to everyone. For the environmental cause, would you rather pursue lifestyle change or systematic change, and why?
So I would say systematic change, because you just talked about it, and it was really inspiring to hear everything you said. But also, I think something that really stuck with me is that the environmental crisis is such a social issue too, and there's a lot of spheres that intersect like politics and social issues. So I think working towards decolonization and changing who is in charge of using these resources, and all of these things can really help change the way we see environmentalism and sustainability. So I would say systematic.
Maybe I'll jump in so I'm not the last word this time, if that's okay. And I want to say I'm not denigrating, I don't denigrate individual actions. We do it. It's actually easier for me to do it most of the time than not do it, because we've been doing it for decades. And I think it's important to model for younger people what a more sustainable lifestyle looks like. So we've tried to do that. But I also think it matters what level of wealth you're at. So like what you're saying, about different countries and economies. Apparently the 1%, which is people who make over, I think it's 500,000, they're responsible for 17% of global emissions, the 1%. The 10%, which is, I think my husband and I are in this category, it's like 90,000, maybe close to 100. We're responsible for 50% of global emissions, most of which is jet fuel. So if you want to do one thing, start questioning the flings that are, the weekends in Hawaii or such. So I think that's the way that I try to do both. I do the system change stuff in my work, but I also try to talk about, who's actually got the big carbon footprint, and let's start looking at that. And then for myself, I try not to fly much. So, to you now.
For me, I believe it's going to be systematic. So an example is going to be, we want to reduce car usage in a city. As a person, as an individual, you can't really solve that. You need city council to vote on it. You need state funding for transit-oriented development, for electrifying your bus fleets, for adding protected bike lanes. And so this is coming from top-down initiatives, not meaning that, individuals cannot organize and push for these great policies, but if you want to see a bike lane in your neighborhood, if you want to have more dense infill housing, that is something systematic. And I believe that if governments are willing to, are going to combat climate change, it's going to be that way, not from a person not having a steak one night. Yeah.
I would say, since it was a would you rather question, I'm going to go with lifestyle change, just because I feel like that is what warrants more connection with the individual and talking with people specifically and getting people engaged enough to want to tackle that bigger problem of systemic change. And that's kind of the route that I went along. I was more going the systemic change route with protests and demonstrations and as mentioned in my bio, the LEDWP meetings. And while that was very rewarding, working with those bigger entities wasn't as impactful in my personal experience because I did it for a short amount of time versus working directly with my school and the school administrators and children in my community and getting them excited personally. And I feel like I would rather do the lifestyle change just so I can work with people more directly.
And I saw that you had your hand up. Would you like to comment? Thank you. And I'd like to segue into a passage that you wrote where you say, we can begin with the assumption that everyone wants a livable planet and stop requiring that individuals be lifestyle heroes. To me, this stands out as a very inviting, rally around the same basic want for survival approach. Can you elaborate on how to best practice said approach? And everyone, please chime in. Let me go ahead.
I'm pretty hearing impaired, so
Yes. It's
it sounds
question
like
5.
it's question 5. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Even with my hearing aids, somehow it's okay. So the passage. We can begin with the assumption that everyone wants a livable planet and stop requiring that individuals be lifestyle heroes. To me, this stands out as a very inviting rally around the same basic want for survival approach. Yeah, I think we need to find our common ground. And I think nobody wants, well, there are some people who know, I mean, there are CEOs of oil company who know very well what's going on. They're the ones that are, designing these campaigns of misinformation or who are suing, Greenpeace or, so I think there are some people who are deliberately trying to make a profit from polluting. And I think they're just a little, I don't know, they weren't raised well or their wiring is off or something is up that they don't connect to their basic humanity or to the legacy, of where we've come from and what we owe to ancestors and mostly what we owe to the future. So I know that those people exist who don't care for whatever reason, they're sociopaths or and such. But I think today, Tor and I were talking about, and Dina and I, we were talking about reaching other people who are not progressive, who I don't identify as, environmentalists or activists. And I think it's important to go sort of from human to human and talk about our shared goals. And a lot of people really love nature. They're hunters, they're fisher people, so I think finding that common space, those shared values. And Catherine Hayhoe has a book about this. She's all about talking about shared values. Her book is called Saving Ourselves, something like that, Saving Us. It's pretty new, and she talks about this arena of finding common ground, because most of us have it. Yeah, thank you for your question. Now I'll give you back your.
And I saw that you had your hand up, please.
I think that's a great point, and I think it would be interesting to pivot off of that beautiful point to you three, or all four of you, in terms of what did you want in the classroom? What have you seen? Is this okay, Nora, for me to like come up with a question for you on that of your young people? You've recently, tell us what you wished for in the classroom or what you wish for now. What would help you and your friends?
Definitely. I think not having doomerism as like the overarching like factor in the chapter, like yeah, it is a crisis and there is a lot of doom and gloom, unfortunately, but that shouldn't be like the feature of the chapter. Like when we were learning about it or like seeing videos, it's like, oh yeah, like this is it. Like it's like always like what if, like who is gonna solve it, like who is gonna do something about it. It never really gives you like an avenue, an opportunity for solutions of like, oh, you are the solution. Like you should organize, you should be the ones implementing these great ideas locally and then challenging, as we saw in your presentation, like politicians and CEOs and everything. So maybe if we had something more community-based in our schools, like we would have like a day we would go all organize or plant some more trees on campus, something like that, interactive.
Yeah, I love this topic, but climate education, climate literacy programs are really important, and I think what's more important is making sure that these programs aren't centered around just focusing on all the negatives, like, oh, this is so bad, and all of these things are leading to this, but it's also just as important to highlight all the good things that are happening too, because as young people, when you're faced with the idea that you can't really do anything about this, like you're just one person, you're one kid against the entire world. It's really disheartening, and it doesn't help at all for you to it doesn't inspire you in any way. So when you're faced with more of the positive side of how people are doing things to change things, or how pandas were the face of endangered species for years, and now they're not endangered anymore. Learning about all these things and these different solutions that people are coming up with every day is definitely really inspiring for students to want to also be a part of that change, positive change. So yeah, I definitely think climate literacy and shifting away from the doomism and highlighting all the great things that are also coming out of it is important.
I would say for me, the most important thing I have experienced throughout my high school years are the adults that are willing to support students in, their passions for environmentalism, or just showing that they care about students caring about this issue. And just as you were describing, adults working with the youth, youth have so much passion, we have so much that we want to do, but most of the time we can't do it without adult guidance, and we can't do it without connections to these systems. And this is definitely something that I have learned. The club that I run at my school, we do a lot of composting. We try to get school districts on board with composting. And at first, we tried to go through LA County and Parks and Recreation. We worked with them for a long time. And we eventually were not able to run that program. So when we switched directions and worked with our school district instead, they were a lot more supportive of student-led initiatives and working with youth. So that is definitely something that I've been very grateful for, and I would just love to see more of in my school.
And I would just say having avenues of action for people so that they can also join, come in. We can plant milkweeds for the monarch butterflies. We can plant trees for carbon capture. There are physical things that we can do, and if there are systems in place that allow people and invite people to come and join, there will be people who come and join. People who care, like us. And I'd like to talk about how we can effectively address the climate change with friends and loved ones who might not believe it to be a pressing issue.
I personally have a lot of wonderful childhood memories in nature. My grandparents live on a farm in Japan, and we'd go there every summer. And so most of my childhood memories that are really important to me are me in nature, me with the people that I love. And I believe that we all have those experiences because we live those every day. So if you were to approach someone that maybe isn't as passionate about the issue as you are, we all have wonderful experiences in nature, and I think we can all empathize with the feeling of wanting to preserve that and wanting other people to have that experience as well.
Go ahead.
Can you hold that? Because I know that there were more thoughts within Nora's question. It seemed like you both had something you might want to say about that. So that's a great question. I just want to let them finish speaking.
Yeah, I think what's really important about when you're communicating with someone who might not exactly believe climate change to be a real thing, it's important to show them that the real faces, put a face to climate change. Sometimes numbers just don't cut it for some people. So sharing the stories of people who have been personally impacted by rising sea levels or disastrous weather events, that can really help them connect this really big issue with a human face and help them empathize and kind of realize that this is a pressing issue.
For me, it's going to be showing people what they can see directly. So if you don't believe in climate change, if I came across someone like that, I usually say, well, cars, for instance, emit a lot of pollutants, and if you stand there, you can smell the pollutants. We know it causes childhood asthma. We know it causes respiratory diseases. And so an example would be, we all want more walkable cities, so more fresh air, less reliance on combustion engines. So these are things that people can understand on the human level, more human-centric. And so even if you don't believe in climate change, getting dirty cars off the road is still a plus because you won't have as many kids ending up in the hospital because of asthma. Or you'll have cleaner streets, more shade from trees, less urban heat island effect, so it'll be cooler in the summer, and you'll have a more community-based city if you have more dense housing that's more walkable. You can bike places instead of having to have a long haul drive. So that's what I would tell people. Yeah,
Those are great ideas, and I think for me, I do some of the same thing, and I'll just say to people, this is what I'm going to do. It'd be great if you join me, but I don't worry about trying to get allies. I do a lot of the things that you three have spoken about, and throw things out there to see what sticks for people. But I think it's important to also just connect humanly, and if they're not there, if they're not ready, or if they're not there, I'm not going to work hard at trying to convince somebody. I'll put my efforts on the people that are already kind of on this same wavelength, but they don't know what to do. So I try to empower other people who are already, in the choir. So should we return to this question? So you were asking about like how did I kind of start to have, to be this person who speaks out? Was that the essence of it? Like how did I? Oh, I don't have a successful career. I don't. I don't make much money. I make my money teaching music because I've been doing it for 30 years. And probably at 35 at this point. I make a little bit freelance. I don't have a great career. This is not a good career for, unless you're, maybe if I were super young and I had more energy or I had more connections or something, I'm not sure. Maybe if I had more of a tolerance for social media, I could do what people are telling me to do. And so it is not a great career. It is, I'm married to someone who's a teacher with a retirement. And so I just decided that I can't live with myself if I don't throw all my gifts at it. And I do have some gifts. I'm pretty good at writing. I've done a lot of theater. I worked in the film industry. I have a musical background since I was 5. So I have the ability to do these things, and I have the privilege of not having college debt that a lot of this generation does not have or will not have that privilege. And so I just see it as on my deathbed, whenever that is, I want to say that I did everything that I could, and I'm going to have to live, we live pretty simply in a lot of ways. We have more money lately, but for the first 50 years of our lives, we didn't have health insurance, and I still did this work because I couldn't live with myself without doing everything I could, knowing what I do. And so, but there are a lot of people that make a career at it. I just not me. And I don't want to dissuade you from doing that or anybody. I think a lot of you young people probably will have careers in this, but it's my personality, I guess. I just don't want one career, so I have 2. Yes? Well, for sure, as well. Yes, okay, all right. Okay, that's a good point. Okay. You're right. You're right. When I hear career, I think money and a living and retirement and benefits, and I don't have any of that. So you're right. I'm sorry. I was focused on the money aspect because it's an important part of any person's, making a career for themselves. So I have to say I was overworked when I was doing that. I think I injured myself, actually, writing the book, because when Trump came in, I had to completely pivot from offensive to defensive. So the angle of the book is a little bit that, okay, wow, we really don't have, government ambition at the highest levels. And I didn't know how long he'd be in power. So I did have to take, so I guess what I'm saying is it was a lot of work and a lot of learning and a lot of generosity from other people. And I worked really hard on my writing for a decade before I wrote that book. And I also had a lot of passion, and I tend to think of things that are a little out of the box, so people liked that, and that was part of why I got an agent when they heard about this pipeline and they heard about this, some of the projects were intriguing to people. But I want to, pass it back to you.
Thank you. And I saw a hand back there when we were having the discussion earlier.
That's really helpful. That's very succinct.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
The science is behind that, so thank you for that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we've talked a lot about climate anxiety and despair throughout, the presentation and everything, and we've mentioned it a few times. Can we talk about some tips that we can use to help ourselves and those around us to dealing with those emotions? How do we deal with climate anxiety? Ooh.
I feel like Mary's presentation was a very thorough explanation of that. I obviously, probably for most of us, everything that was covered in the presentation is very daunting. I haven't really been taking a good look at all the numbers and all the images in a while, even though this is something I am engaged in pretty daily. But I find a lot of joy in how I spend my extra time because I'm always working with other students who also care about it just as much. We may find plenty of ways to make it fun. Today at school, we had our Earth Day celebration, and a friend of mine made a giant cutout pear because we are the Pear Tree Foundation, and we got someone to wear the pear around, and people took pictures with them. And the people who we handed out stickers, and our school, not that every single student is going to be just as engaged as the people who organize the event, but it brings a lot of joy to me that people are hearing about it, that Saturday, Earth Day, isn't just going to pass without anyone thinking about it. So that's how I deal with my anxieties about it, doing something about it, engaging with people, laughing with people, and loving the things that we do in order to try to help the issue.
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that really helps you overcome this doomism is taking action. And while you're taking action, meeting people who also care and who are also doing things to fight climate change. So participating in events either your Earth Day celebration or a local cleanup. For me, recently I had the 41st annual Avalon Underwater Harbor cleanup, and that was just really amazing for me, and it was really inspiring because even though it was a cleanup, there wasn't that much trash. And so that's a really great sign that things are going a lot better than you probably expected. I was expecting to pick up a lot more trash, but the biggest piece of trash I found underwater was a pickle, a hamburger pickle. So that made me really happy, and I also got to meet a lot of people there who cared about the environment and who were also actively engaged and always participating in these events. So that really helped a lot.
For me, it's been providing information about local resources that people can use today, right now. So let's say you don't want to drive your gas guzzling vehicle anymore. If you're currently enrolled in a college or you have kids who are K to 12, there's something called LA Metro Go Pass. It's a free transit card, and they're expediting it for another year. And you could use that on any transit network, any train in LA County, and you'll get around. So that's one immediate resource, a tool where you don't have to use a car in LA County. Another one is looking up your local water and power website. So for GWP, for instance, they are providing subsidized or even free shower heads. I know they're giving out rain barrels, for instance, when it rains, if you request one. There's new electric reach codes that the city recently passed, for instance, and that's being incorporated in new buildings. So providing people information and resources so that they can utilize it can make them feel a bit more calm and better because you're controlling the narrative for your local and current environment.
I can confirm it was very dirty last year. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm not personally involved in my school's journalism, but I do have a similar experience about like highlighting all of these great things that are happening. I'm part of the Future Blue Youth Council. It's an international group of students, and we publish a newsletter with things like it's actually part of Bao Seat's program, and so the Bao Seat hosts an art contest every year, like visual media and also spoken word and poetry and writing. And so we highlight these works of art that are advocating for climate action. And so in that way, in that sense, I've had some experience trying to reach out to a greater audience about the different like climate solutions and also works that people have done. So.
Mine is currently in action, so we're working on it, we're finalizing it. So I'm the vice president for the Students for Sustainability Club at GCC. And one of the things we wanted to do is create a resource for students who want to pursue a career in sustainability. And we're going to incorporate this, I believe, in the Sustainability Commission as well. So it's going to be a free resource, free website. So essentially what we want to do is raise awareness for jobs that you could work as. So you can intern for a tree planting company. I know a lot of students are transferring out to UC systems, so if you're interested in chemistry or biology, a lot of chemical engineers and engineering companies are hiring, for instance, to like seek out more efficient ways of like refining fuel, biofuel, for instance, if that's the avenue that you're going into. Urban planning, for instance, we want to help integrate government websites into this website. And so that's some resources that we want to provide for students on top of like bi-monthly newsletters.
Sorry. Well, my two best friends are actually the EICs of my school's journalism, so I get to hear a lot about how the class works, and yeah, I definitely think it's a great way to reach out to students and just seeing that front page of like Earth Day or whatever, recycling or anything that's going on in the school or the community, just to let kids know. It just takes like one flyer, one newspaper article to get one more person involved, so I think that's definitely a great avenue.
It could be composted.
I think that's one of the important things too, is to fight for municipal composting. I mean, there are apartment buildings in Denmark where the buildings, like you're in your apartment, there's 30 apartments, and you just dump it on something and it gets sucked through some kind of magical Danish compost sucker. I mean, they have, like, their buildings are designed or they are designing buildings that incorporate all this, so it doesn't have to rely on these armies of, activists and young people who are not paid. And so that's kind of what I keep advocating, is we need to be electing people who are going to be implementing solutions that already exist in other countries and funding these things and not putting it on us to have to change our lifestyles and do double shifts as, workers and students and parents to then go and do the things that our government should be doing. Those are the things that I really would like to advocate for, is work to get your city councilors elected that are going to fund sensible climate policies. Work to get people in power who are going to, get federal judges that are not going to throw out climate cases. Work to get people at the highest levels of government who are actually going to believe in the science and are going to heed the top climate scientists. It's great to do all this stuff, and it's important, and it's connecting, and we've got to keep our eye on the bigger system stuff too.
Yes. We have a sustainability commission every month, and every month we have action items, and two members over here are on the sustainability ex officio members too. And there are exciting initiatives that we're constantly discussing, and it moves up the ladder.
I'd just like to add something. I would love to get in touch with you. My organization at school, we have 100 high schoolers that can help you with that. So that's basically exactly what we do, the type of projects and initiatives we like to take on. So we will be in contact.
And I have one last question here, because we do have a raffle that we want to do. And my last question is, what is one piece of advice you would give to someone who is looking to become more involved in the climate movement?
I'm going to kind of loop back around to civic engagement. Yes, it is so imperative that people read into who they are electing and what their values are and what they believe in, because at the end of the day, especially local politicians, this is where stuff gets done. It's not federal, it's not state. Yes, they provide funding and a benchmark and guidance in many ways, but most things are local ordinances. Most things are local city council meetings. And so thankfully Glendale is really sustainable compared to like other cities in the US. But for neighboring cities and for future council elections, just pay attention to who you're electing, what their values are, and what you want to see. So if you want to see more bike lanes, elect someone who proposes more bike lanes. If you want to see more tree planting, more urban development, more affordable housing, look at initiatives and policies that certain politicians like and canvass for them, help them, get elected. Maybe encourage your other friends to, get involved in civic engagement. You don't have to necessarily just be voting. You could be out there helping clean up, like ex officio Commissioner Kudo mentioned over here. These are small local things that do make a greater impact if it's compounded by a lot of cities.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Definitely like to echo what Mike said. And even like beyond civic engagement, at your local school, you just have to look like really locally, like who do you interact with on a daily basis, and what are some environmental issues that you see on a day-to-day basis that you can maybe change. And so like getting involved with a schools club, or maybe like founding one yourself, because there might not already be one in place. There are a lot of things that you can do. You just have to take initiative, and you also have to put yourself out there and be really open to collaborating with other people, and making use of all the resources that you have. There's a lot of open data online too, so you can get into like mapping all of these statistics and doing your own research on different climate issues and developing your own climate solutions. And you just need to find the resources, maybe reaching out to a school teacher or something. So I think and even in government, people care. You have to realize that people care about your voice more than you think they do. So applying for these positions to be on like a council or becoming involved in government. All of these things are things that you can do to be more active in your environmentalism.
And just to quickly pinpoint this, I'm really sorry for interrupting. I've been going to a lot of city council meetings recently. I happen to be one of the only young person there. Please go out, reach out to your friends, because right now the people who are coming to city council meetings are ones who are well off, who have the time and privilege and luxury to go and lobby city council. And if you want to see more local action, sometimes you do have to take a few hours out of your night on Tuesday and go there and just let people know, submit a public comment, write them an email, maybe even call in. Civic engagement is critical, and city council themselves has openly said they want to see more young people interacting and seeing their views, because it does sway how people vote and even implement some policy.
Julia?
I love that idea. I think definitely getting those resources is a hindrance to anyone that wants to make that action in their community. So having that type of communal access to those materials is a great idea. And to use that to answer the question, definitely ways that you can get involved. Programs like that, many of them exist that are similar, that have different benefits as the one that you were describing. And if you just look around, they are usually there. And then I think also looking within, as Mary was describing, what skills do you have to offer to the movement? Are you a good writer? Are you artistic? Are you really technologically savvy? And I think something that I've really enjoyed is seeing how different students can offer those different skills. There are students who can make websites for us, and people who make posters for us, and all of that is equally valuable to the movement that we are doing. So if you are looking to get involved, what are you good at and what can you offer to the movement?
That's called the climate Venn diagram. What you want, what you like, what you can do. Yeah. Any last comment from our panelists here? We have to wrap up and do our
I would just
wrap-up.
add, and what brings you joy? And for me, the arts and writing, and that's what I did, tell stories and make artwork on my front lawn, which grew. And that was with other people. So it made me happy to do those things. Also, you should run for office. You have a lot of good ideas.
Alrighty.
Revolution.
It all ties around. Well, thank you everyone who is joining us from the live stream, and thank you everyone who is here physically. Thank you for all the panelists and for Mary. I really enjoyed this talk, and we are going to have another one next week, so I hope to see all of you there too. We are now going to end the live stream, then we're going to do our raffle. Does everyone have tickets, or does